And speaking of people that make a difference, the Greater Houston Partnership has been playing a significant role in this city and in this state, and by virtue of that in this nation for some time. And the accolades that have been coming to this area are really pretty stunning. And I want to take just a moment and just read off a little laundry list of what's happened in Houston, Texas. You've all made Texas really look good over the course of the last year, being named Best City to Live and Work and Play by Kiplinger's, Best City for Your Job by Business Week. Forbes magazine's called you Best U.S. City to Earn a Living, Best City to Buy a Home, Best City for Recent College Grads. And if you didn't know any better, I'd say Forbes has a crush on Houston, the way they've been fawning over Houston in their publication. And the accumulation of all of that evidence supports what those publications have been saying, that Houston is in good shape. And I might add, so is Texas. Of course, some things in the world around here have changed since many of those various awards were announced. Change that came in the form of two storms. The first was Hurricane Ike, that weather system that hammered the coastal area, hit Houston especially hard. For the better part of a month, the eyes of the world have been trained on this part of Texas as we responded to that thrashing by Hurricane Ike. When the sun came up on the morning of September the 13th, there were more than 2.8 million people without power, thousands of people in dire need of rescue. Fortunately, we had pre-positioned the largest search and rescue operation in Texas history, and were ready to rescue people from a variety of life-threatening situations. Our private sector partners were also ready, and they rolled right into action that morning. Power companies like Entergy, CenterPoint, supplemented by over 20,000 linemen from across the country, as far away as Canada, John. They worked around the clock to restore power. Our fuel team not only bumped up those supplies pre-Hurricane Ike strike, but they kept the gasoline flowing afterwards. Retailers like Walmart, H-E-B, they moved ice and food and water into the area. They worked tirelessly to get their stores back online and conditions moving back to as close to normal as quickly as they could. There's been story after story of Texans going the extra mile to help their neighbors. But that's just how we are. That's Texas. Inspirational stories aside, the truth is there will be a significant financial impact on Texas from Hurricane Ike. We won't know the total price tag for some time, but Congresswoman, I suspect it will exceed that $11.2 billion request that we made from you and your colleagues in Congress. When you consider the resources that were marshaled to deal with the storm, the cost of the countless lost business days, the destroyed homes, the shattered businesses, the price tag is going to be a hefty one. And that's not to even mention the unfathomable cost of loss of life that this storm brought. To that end, we have kept a steady pressure on FEMA to ensure that we get reimbursements on par with those Louisiana received after Katrina. And regardless of how much federal aid we receive, how much the insurers fulfill their claims, the depth of resources that families and businesses can draw upon to rebuild, Ike's financial impact is going to be with us for a while. If that weren't enough, a storm of a different kind was unleashed on the world's financial markets just after Ike roared ashore. After years of irresponsible borrowing and lending, our nation's credit markets essentially imploded, and the American people were left holding the bag. Now, this isn't necessarily the forum for me to share my displeasure with Congress for giving our money to mismanaged corporations, failing institutions that deserve to feel the consequences of their rash behavior. However, I would not describe a $700 billion corporate bailout as the free markets at work. I'll simply say that the impact of this financial storm has left credit very tight for businesses that hope to expand, families wanting to buy a new home or a car, local governments who are recovering from Ike. As a result, Texas businesses and families are tightening their belt. They're cutting spending. They're exercising greater discipline, taking a closer look at the difference between a want and a need. It's times like this. The state government should be no different. That's why I've asked the heads of executive branch state agencies to take a close look at their budgets, figure out what discretionary spending they can cut. In a letter this week, I directed them to start by curtailing taxpayer-funded travel, asked them to report back on additional cost containment measures for the remainder of this fiscal year. Now I'll leave it up to those agencies, executive directors, board chairs to determine whether those steps would include efforts like tighter spending on consumables or even slower pace of new hires. Here's the bottom line. Given the current economic turndown and the expectation that it will ultimately impact Texas, all state agencies need to dial back their spending. And they got 10 days to let me know how they're going to do that. I'm also starting conversations with employers and business groups like so many of you in here. I want to learn firsthand what you're seeing at your cash register. Some of you already have gotten those phone calls. What's happening in your accounting departments, on your sales floors? We need to stay ahead of the situation, Senator. I think it's important for us to have this information and be as nimble as we can be as we go forward. Now, do I think it's time to panic? Absolutely not. However, as good stewards of the resources entrusted to us by the Texas taxpayers, we are obligated to not only monitor the outside forces that are affecting our economy, but to deal with them proactively. We have been proactive throughout the years, making tough choices that helped our state attain this interesting and unique perch that we find ourselves on nationally. And those of you who served with me back in 2003, you recall the complaints that we heard when we tackled that $10 billion budget deficit. Jeff, you were there, by cutting taxes and reducing spending. And we made a lot of personal injury trial lawyers pretty angry with us by reforming a legal system that was driving too many of our citizens out of business and doctors away from clinics and hospitals, from being able to deliver the quality health care that people deserve in this state. We pushed back on a variety of interests as we advocated for a regulatory environment that was predictable, was reasonable. I think we took a beating in the press, as I recall, but our economy is better equipped today than any other state in the nation to handle the two storms that have roiled the financial seas around us. Texas still leads the nation in job production. We are still the #1 exporting state in the nation. We have more Fortune 500 companies calling Texas home than any other state today.